Prince Ashot, the first Bagrationi, was born sometime in the later half of the 8th century. His legacy is over a millennium old, as his direct descendants are still considered nobility to this very day. For Iberia, he marked the return of the princes and a new chapter in Georgian history. This is the story of a monarch who truly deserves the title of the Great. Prince Ashot Bagrationi was born in the Duchy of Tao-Klarjeti. We aren't sure about his exact birth date or even what year he was born in, but one can assume that he was born between the years of 750 and 770 AD. His father was a man named Adarnase, and he was the Duke of Tao-Klarjeti. The first pivotal moment in Ashot's life came in 786. In this year, the Abbasid Caliphate, under Caliph Harun al-Rashid, sends a massive army north, hoping to finally annex the lands of Georgia. For nearly the past 100 years, the princes of Iberia were vassals of the Abbasid Caliphate. However, for the past 20, leading up to 786, the Abbasids began showing more and more interest in owning Iberia directly. The current prince of Iberia was a young man named Stephen III. He appeared to not put up much of a fight, as the Abbasids steamrolled Armenia and took the majority of central and eastern Georgia. They also took with them the heads of at least 2 Georgian princes, one being Stephen III and the other being the Prince of Kartli, Archil Chosroid. With their father put to death and their lands sufficiently conquered, the 2 children of Archil fled to the protection of tao-klarjeti, who themselves were under the protection of the Eastern Roman Byzantine Empire. These 2 deposed princes were named John and Jean Shir, and following them was a wave of Georgian refugees. The elder of the 2 brothers, Jean Shir, is married to the daughter of Duke Adarnase. He is also named as Prince of Iberia, which, during his life, was only in de jure, an empty title that no longer commanded the respect it once had. The younger brother, John, dies in 790 without an heir. The older brother, Jean Shir, goes on to do the same in 807. Their possessions and land claims are then passed on to Duke Adarnase, who would then pass them on to his only son, Ashot. In 809, the expansionist Abbasid Caliphate finds itself divided between 2 sons of Caliph Harun al-Rashid. A civil war ensued, and many governors inside the Abbasid Empire took the opportunity to create their own caliphate or emirate. The most crucial of these new Arab states for our story is the Emirate of Tbilisi. After the 786 Abbasid invasion, a man named Ismail ibn Shab is installed as the governor of Iberia from his seat in the modern-day capital of Georgia, Tbilisi. When the 809 Abbasid succession crisis broke out, he was one of the first to break away from the caliphate. He was assisted by a local Georgian strongman named Grigol. After the 786 invasion, and with the absence of the executed Prince Stephen III, a power vacuum was created in Kakheti, eastern Georgia. It was filled by Grigol, who named himself Prince and Bishop over Kakheti. There was no way to tell if collusion between Grigol of Kakheti and Ismail ibn Shab occurred before 809, but one can assume, simply based on the fact that Grigol did not lose his head, that there was some kind of informal partnership between these 2 men. And if there wasn't then there was certainly an alliance formed after Ismail ibn Shab declared his independence in 809. However, the Emirate of Tbilisi would be short-lived. Later in 809, a recently crowned Abbasid Caliph named Al-Amin marched north to Tbilisi. The outnumbered Ismail ibn Shab had little choice but to surrender. This he did with little to no fight. He was then reinstalled as governor over Iberia, before Caliph Al-Amin returned south to confront his soon-to-be rebellious brother named Al-Mamun. Meanwhile, in the Duchy of Tao-Klarjeti, the downtrodden Georgians began to rally around the preachings of an abbot named Gregory. From his monastery at Konsta, Gregory started gathering a noticeable following. His preachings, although religious in nature, would often end with a call to action against the Arab invaders who had taken central and eastern Georgia. In 811, Duke Adarnase of Tao-Klarjeti would die, leaving all of his inheritance to his only son, Ashot. While Duke Adarnase remained somewhat stagnant during his reign, the same cannot be said of his son. Almost immediately, Ashot begins the symbolic repair of Artunaji Fortress. Located in Klarjeti, this castle was built by the Wolf King himself, the Hakhtun Gorgasali. One of the most remembered kings of Iberia, Vahaktun Gurgasali was so influential that his name was eventually immortalized, as it is he that the modern-day country of Georgia is named after. This repair would connect Ashot to the Great King. Continuing to follow in his footsteps, Ashot begins to look for allies. And just like Vahaktun, Ashot looked toward the Byzantine Empire. Later in 811, Ashot Bagrationi would be named as a Kouropalate. This title was one given out by the emperors of Eastern Rome, and was one of the most honorific titles you could earn in the empire. The title translates to in charge of the palace, but eventually evolved to symbolize something of a personal sponsorship from the emperor. The first Georgian to hold such a rank was Prince Guram I, the first presiding prince of Iberia. Many of the following vassal princes held the same title, with Prince Nurse becoming the last to do so. Ashot wore the title of Kouropalates very proudly. After all, it commanded more respect than being a duke. Typically, Duke Ashot could be found wearing the red tunic and belt that symbolized his Kouropalate status. His western flank was now all but secured by the protection of his title. His neighbor to the north, King Leon II of Abkhazia, was also pacified, this time by marriage. The eldest son of King Leon II, a man named Theodosius II, was married to the daughter of Ashot Bagrationi. This made Ashot the father-in-law of the future king of Abkhazia. Now with his northern border secured, the Duke had only to worry about the Abbasid Caliphate to his south and east, but not for long. The Caliphal brothers, Al-Mamun and Al-Amin, had continued their civil war. After 4 years in 813, the brother to come out on top was Al-Mamun. He had his younger brother executed and became the sole Abbasid Caliph. However, the civil war continued in a few places, namely in Iraq, Arabia, and Tbilisi. After his first failed revolt that was stamped out by Caliph Al-Amin, Ismail ibn Shab agreed to become a loyal governor once again. However, no agreement was made between the governor and Al-Mamun. Shortly after Al-Amin's execution in 813, Ismail ibn Shab again declared his independence, becoming Emir of Tbilisi. Like last time, he was not alone, but assisted by Grigul of Kakheti. Caliph Al-Mamun had no time to venture to the peripheries of his control. He was dealing with rebellions more central to his empire. So instead of personally dealing with Ismail ibn Shab and his Kakhetian collaborator, Al-Mamun does something wholly unexpected. In 813, Caliph Al-Mamun names Ashot Bagrationi as the Prince of Iberia, giving him the go-ahead to subjugate the Emirate of Tbilisi. The title of prince had been an absent one since the death of Ashot's brother-in-law, Janshir Chosroid, in 807. Now after 6 years, and 17 years since the execution of the last Iberian prince to hold any real power, Stephen III, the title was resurrected by the very same entity that had destroyed it. Make no mistake, Iberia was still a vassal of the Eastern Roman Empire, but was left in something of a mercenary limbo state with Al-Mamun's proposal to Ashot. Now with his west, north, and south all secured, and his sponsorship from the two biggest regional powers, Ashot had only to look east, towards the city of Tbilisi. The Kouropalate Prince of Iberia began assembling an army, employing the assistance of the influential abbot, Gregory of Consta. In recent years, Gregory's sermons continued attracting large crowds, as he was quickly becoming the face of Georgia's Orthodox Church. With permission granted and preparations concluded, Prince Ashot began his eastward march. Through a series of swift occupations, he brought much of South Georgia under his domain, at the expense of the Tbilisi Emirate. Sometime during these initial gains, the Emir, Ismail ibn Shab, would meet the recently crowned prince. In the ensuing battle, the Emir would be killed, and nearly all of his emirate would fall into Ashot's hands, with the exception of Tbilisi itself. A new emir would be found, in the form of a man named Muhammad ibn Attab, who would continue in the futile defense of the little land he still controlled. Emir Muhammad would eventually be forced into guerrilla warfare, going on the defensive to try to stem the flow of Ashot. This kind of slow-paced, grogging warfare would continue for the next 13 years. In 826, the emir decided that the time to fight back had come. With help from the allied Prince Bishop of Kakheti, Grigori, a counteroffensive into central Georgia was launched. Together, they pushed Ashot's forces past the Kasani River. However, this otherwise successful offensive was forced to a sudden stop after a year. In 827, Grigori of Kakheti, longtime rival of Ashot and ally to the emirate, dies of natural causes. He would be succeeded by another prominent Kakhetian, named Vache Kavabaludzi. The death of Grigori, although important for stalling this campaign, is overshadowed by the death of another ruler in the region, King Leon II of Abkhazia. Leon II, Abkhazia's first independent king, was the leading neutral power in the Caucasus Mountain region. His diplomatic mind always chose peace rather than war. His death in 828 would see the sleeping giant awaken under his son, the now King Theodosius II, otherwise known as the son-in-law of Ashot Bagrationi. Unlike his father, Theodosius did not stand idly by while Ashot was being pushed back. Instead, he brought an army to the Iberian Prince. With their forces combined, they pushed the army of Vache and Emir Muhammad back to the Kasani River. The armies met in full force on the western bank of the Kasani. The four commanders fought a ferocious battle until the Kakhetians and Arabs broke and attempted to flee across the river. Many drowned in their flight as Ashot and the Abkhazians pushed forward, reoccupying the lands that he held at the beginning of this long war. In that same year of 828, after the emir and prince bishop were forced back to their respective territories, a new Abbasid governor of Armenia was installed. His name was Khalid ibn Yazid. He had briefly been governor of Armenia in 813, possibly to lend assistance to Ashot, but in 814 he was removed from the position, as his expertise were needed elsewhere in the empire. Caliph al-Mamun had installed Khalid to personally deal with the Tbilisi Emirate. Al-Mamun had given Ashot a chance to reconquer the city, but he was simply just taking too long for the Caliph. In under a year, the Armenian governor deposes Emir Muhammad, but instead of abolishing the emirate, he appoints the brother of Ismail ibn Shab as the new, loyal emir. His name was Ali ibn Shab, and with his assistance from Governor Khalid, he begins a new campaign against Ashot and Theodosius. Like before, the forces of Ashot are pushed back, this time much farther. The Arab forces managed to take back all of what Ashot occupied in that previous year, and even more. They would invade Klarjeti itself, with Ashot continuing to fall back deeper into his duchy. One day, in the midst of this retreat, Ashot prayed for his deliverance at a local church. His prayers would be answered, but not in the way he'd hoped for. Ashot never saw the assassins coming. He would be killed on January 29th of 830 by assassins under the employment of Governor Khalid ibn Yazid. His bloodied body would be found moments later on the altar of the church. He would be succeeded as Prince of Iberia by his son, Bagrat. Ashot Bagrationi the Great of Iberia is responsible for the resurgence of Iberia after the 786 Arab invasion that was almost a complete domination. From his home base in tao-klarjeti, he managed to align himself with Eastern Rome, Abkhazia, and even the Abbasid Empire for a time. Eventually, he would be betrayed after fighting the Emirate of Tbilisi on behalf of the Abbasid Caliphate. His reign is most important, as he marks the first of many, and I mean many, rulers of Georgia that hailed from the Bagrationi family. If you watched my video on the origins of the Bagrationi family, then you would already know that this is the first of many, and I mean many videos that I am making on the whole of the Bagrationi dynasty that ruled in one part or another of Georgia for nearly 1,000 years. If you'd like to support this series, feel free to do so on my Patreon and become a member for as little as $1 a month.